Hello and welcome to the Cultured Bumpkin. This is Jake, and this is my first live in over a week. I've been at my grandparents trying to help them in North Carolina. So, anywho, back in the saddle for now. Chapter 17 of Treasure Island. Narrative continued by the doctor. The Jolly Boat's last trip. This trip was quite different from any of the others. In the first place, the little gallipot of a boat that we were in was gravely overloaded. 5 grown men, and 3 of them, Trelawney, Redruth, and the captain, over 6 feet high, and was already more than she was meant to carry. Add to that the powder, pork, and bread bags. The gunwale was lipping astern. Several times we shipped a little water, and my breeches and the tails of my coat were all soaking wet before we'd gone 100 yards. The captain made us trim the boat, and we got her to lie a little more evenly. All the same, we were afraid to breathe. In the second place, the ebb was now making a strong rippling current running westward through the basin, and then southward and seaward down the straits by which we had entered in the morning. Even the ripples were a danger to our overloaded craft, but the worst of it was that we were swept out of our true course and away from our proper landing place behind the point. If we let the current have its way, we should come ashore beside the gigs, where the pirates might appear at any moment. I can't keep her head for the stockade, sir, said I. Sorry. I cannot keep her head for the stockade, sir, said I to the captain. I was steering, while he and Redruth, 2 fresh men, were at the oars. The tide keeps washing her down. Could you pull a little stronger? Not without swamping the boat, said he. You must bear up, sir, if you please. Bear up till you see you're gaining. I've tried and found by experiment that the tide kept sweeping us westward until I'd laid her head due east, or just about right angles to the way we ought to go. We'll never get ashore at this rate, said I. It's the only course we can lie, sir. We must even lie in it, returned the captain. We must keep upstream. You see, sir, he went on, if once we drop to leeward of the landing place, it's hard to say where we would get ashore, besides the chance of being boarded by the gigs. Whereas the way we go, the current must slacken, and then we can dodge back along the shore. The current's less already, sir, said the man Gray, who was sitting in the foresheets. You can ease her off a bit. Thank you, my man, said I, quite as if nothing had happened, for we had all quietly made up our minds to treat him like one of ourselves. Suddenly, the captain spoke up again, and I thought his voice was a little changed. The gun, said he. I've thought of that, said I, for I made sure he was thinking of a bombardment of the fort. They could never get the gun ashore, and if they did, they could never haul it through the woods. Look astern, doctor, replied the captain. We had entirely forgotten the long 9, and there, to our horror, were the 5 rogues busy about her, getting off her jacket, as they called the stout tarpaulin cover under which she sailed. Not only that, but it flashed into my mind at the same moment that the round shot and the powder for the gun had been left behind, and a stroke with an axe would have put it all into the possession of the evil ones aboard. Israel was Flint's gunner, said Gray hoarsely. At any risk, we put the boat's head direct for the landing place. By this time, we had got so far out of the run of the current that we kept steerage way even at our necessarily gentle rate of rowing, and I could keep her steady for the goal. But the worst of it was that with the course I now held, we turned our broadside instead of our stern to the Hispaniola and offered a target like a barn door. I could hear as well as see that brandy-faced rascal Israel Hands plumping down a round shot onto the deck. "Who's the best shot?" asked the captain. "Mr. Trelawney out and away," said I. "Mr. Trelawney, will you please pick me off one of these men, sir? Hands, if possible," said the captain. Trelawney was cool as steel. He took to the priming of his gun. "Now," cried the captain, "easy with that gun, sir. You'll swamp the boat. All hands stand by to trim her when he aims." The squire raised his gun. The rowing ceased, and we leaned over to the other side to keep the balance. And all was so nicely contrived that we did not ship a drop. They had the gun by this time slewed round upon the swivel, and Hans, who was at the muzzle with the rammer, was in consequence the most exposed. However, we had no luck, for just as Trelawney fired, down he stooped, the ball whistled over him, and it was one of the other four who fell. The cry he gave was echoed not only by his companions on board, but by a great number of voices from the shore. And looking in that direction, I saw the other pirates trooping out from among the trees. and tumbling into their places into the boats. "Here come the gigs, sir," said I. "Give way, then," cried the captain. "We mustn't mind if we swamp her now. If we can't get ashore, all's up." "Only one of the gigs is being manned, sir," I added. "The crew of the other most likely going round by shore to cut us off." "They'll have a hot run, sir," returned the captain. "Jack ashore, you know. It's not them I mind, it's the round shot. Carpet bowls! My lady's maid couldn't miss. Tell the squire when you see the match, and we'll hold water." In the meanwhile, we'd been making headway at a good pace for a boat so overloaded, and we shipped out a little water in the process. We were close now, 30 or 40 strokes, and we should beach her, for the ebb had already disclosed a narrow belt of sand below the clustering trees. The gig was no longer to be feared. The little point had already concealed it from our eyes. The ebb tide, which had so cruelly delayed us, was now making reparation and delay in our assailants. The one source of danger was the gun. "If I durst," said the captain, "I'd stop and pick off another man." But it was plain that they meant nothing should delay their shot. They had never so much as looked at their fallen comrade, though he was not dead, and I could see him trying to crawl away. "Ready!" cried the squire. "Hold!" cried the captain, quick as an echo, and he and Redruth backed with a great heave and sent her stern bodily under water. The report fell in at the same instant of time. This was the first that Jim heard, and the sound of the squire's shot not having reached him. Where the ball passed, not one of us precisely knew, but I fancy it must have been over our heads, and the wind of it may have contributed to our disaster. At any rate, the boat sank by the stern quite gently in 3 feet of water, leaving the captain and myself facing each other on our feet. The other 3 took complete headers and came up again drenched and bubbling. So far there was no great harm. No lives were lost, and we could wade ashore in safety. But there were all of our stores at the bottom, and to make things worse, only 2 out of the 5 remained in a state for service. And only 2 guns out of 5 remained in a state for service. Mine I snatched from my knees and held over my head by a sort of instinct. As for the captain, he carried his over his shoulder by a bandolier, and like a wise man, lock uppermost. The other 3 had gone down with the boat. To add to our concern, we heard voices already drawing near us in the woods along shore, and we had not only the danger of being cut off from the stockade in our half-crippled state, but the fear before us whether, if Hunter or Joyce were attacked by half a dozen, they would have the sense and conduct to stand firm. Hunter was ready, that we knew. Joyce was a doubtful case, a pleasant, polite man for a valet and to brush one's clothes, but not entirely fitted for a man of war. With all this in our minds, we waded ashore as fast as we could, leaving behind us the poor jolly boat and a good half of all our powder and provisions. That was chapter 17. See, that wasn't too long. Let's see what old chapter 18 looks like. I think we could do that one. Chapter 18. Narrative continued by the doctor. End of the first day's fighting. We made our best speed across the strip of wood that now divided us from the stockade, and at every step we took the voices of the and at every step we took, the voices of the buccaneers rang nearer. Soon we could hear their footfalls as they ran and the cracking of the branches as they breasted across a bit of thicket. I began to see we should have a brush for it in earnest and looked for my priming. "Captain," said I, "Trelawney is the dead shot. Give him your gun. His own is useless." They exchanged guns, and Trelawney, silent and cool as he had been since the beginning of the bustle, hung a moment on his heel to see that all was fit for service. At the same time, observing Gray to be unarmed, I handed him my cutlass. It did all our hearts good to see him spit in his hand, knit his brows, and make the blade sing through the air. It was plain from every line of his body that our new hand was worth his salt. 40 paces farther we came to the edge of the wood and saw the stockade in front of us. We struck the enclosure about the middle of the south side, and almost at the same time 7 mutineers, Job Anderson, the boatswain at their head, appeared in full cry at the southwestern corner. They paused as if taken aback, and before they recovered, not only the squire and I, but Hunter and Joyce from the blockhouse had time to fire. The 4 shots came in rather a scattering volley, but they did the business. One of the enemy actually fell, and the rest, without hesitation, turned and plunged into the trees. After reloading, we walked down the outside of the palisade to see the fallen enemy. He was stone dead, shot through the heart. We began to rejoice over our good success, when just at that moment a pistol cracked in the bush, a ball whistling close past my ear, and poor Tom Redruth stumbled and fell his length on the ground. Both the squire and I returned the shot, but as we had nothing to aim at, it is probable we only wasted powder. Then we reloaded and turned our attention to poor Tom. The captain and Gray were already examining him, and I saw with the half an eye that it was all over. I believe the readiness of our return volley had scattered the mutineers. I believe the readiness of our return volley had scattered the mutineers once more, for we were suffered, without further molestation, to get the poor old gamekeeper hoisted over the stockade and carried, groaning and bleeding, into the log house. Poor old fellow. He had not uttered one word of surprise, complaint, fear, or even acquiescence from the very beginning of our troubles till now, when we laid him down in the log house to die. He had lain like a Trojan behind his mattress in the gallery. He had followed every order silently, doggedly, and well. He was the oldest of our party by a score of years, and now sullen, old, serviceable servant, it was he that was to die. The squire dropped down beside him on his knees and kissed his hand, crying like a child. "Be I going, doctor?" he asked. "Tom, my man," said I, "you're going home." "I wish I had a lick at him with that gun first," he replied. "Tom," said the squire, "say you forgive me, won't you?" "Would that be respectful like from me to you, squire?" was the answer. "Howsoever, so be it. Amen." After a little while of silence, he said he thought somebody might read a prayer. "It's the custom, sir," he added apologetically, and not long after, without another word, he passed away. In the meantime, the captain, whom I had observed to be wonderfully swollen about the chest and pockets, had turned out a great many various stores: the British colors, a Bible, a coil of stoutish rope, pen, ink, the logbook, and pounds of tobacco. He had found a longish fir tree lying felled and trimmed in the enclosure, and with the help of Hunter, he had set it up at the corner of the log house where the trunks crossed and made an angle. Then, climbing on the roof, he had with his own hand bent and run up the colors. This seemed mightily to relieve him. He re-entered the log house and set about counting up the stores as if nothing else existed. But he had an eye on Tom's passage for all that, and as soon as all was over, came forward with another flag and reverently spread it on the body. "Don't you take on, sir," he said, shaking the squire's hand. "All's well with him. No fear for a hand that's been shot down in his duty to captain and owner. It mayn't be good divinity, but it's a fact." Then he pulled me aside. "Dr. Livesey," he said, in how many weeks do you and Squire expect the consort?" I told him it was a question not of weeks but of months, that if we were not back by the end of August, Blandley was to be sent to find us, but neither sooner nor later. "You can calculate for yourself," I said. "Why, yes," returned the captain, scratching his head, "and making a large allowance, sir, for all the gifts of Providence, I should say we're pretty close hauled." "How do you mean?" I asked. "It's a pity, sir, that we lost that second load. That's what I mean." "It's a pity, sir, that we lost that second load. That's what I mean," replied the captain. "As for powder and shot, we'll do, but the rations are short, very short. So short, Dr. Livesey, that perhaps we're as well without that extra mouth." And he pointed to the dead body under the flag. Just then, with a roar and a whistle, a round shot passed high above the roof of the log house and plumped far beyond us in the woods. "Oh," said the captain, "blaze away! You've little enough powder already, my lads." At the second trial, the aim was better, and the ball descended inside the stockade, scattering a cloud of sand, but doing no further damage. "Captain," said the squire, "the house is quite invisible from the ship. It must be the flag they're aiming at. Would it not be wiser to take it in?" "Strike the colors?" cried the captain. "No, sir, not I." And as soon as he said the words, I think we all agreed with him. For it was not only a piece of stout, seamanly good feeling, it was good policy besides, and showed our enemies that we despised their cannonade. All through the evening they kept thundering away. Ball after ball flew over or fell short or kicked up the sand in the enclosure, but they had to fire so high that the shot fell dead and buried itself in the soft sand. We had no ricochet to fear, and though one popped in through the roof of the log house and out again through the floor, we soon got used to that sort of horseplay and minded it no more than cricket. "There's one good thing about all this," observed the captain. "The wood in front of us is likely clear. The ebb has made a good while. Our store should be uncovered. Volunteers to go and bring in pork." Gray and Hunter were the first to come forward. Well armed, they stole out of the stockade, but it proved a useless mission. The mutineers were bolder than we fancied, or they put more trust in Israel's gunnery, for 4 or 5 of them were busy carrying off our stores and wading out with them to one of the gigs that lay close by, pulling an oar or so to hold her steady against the current. Silver was in the stern sheets in command, and every man of them was now provided with a musket from some secret magazine of their own. The captain sat down to his log, and here is the beginning of the entry. "Alexander Smollett, master; David Livesey, ship's doctor; Abraham Gray, carpenter's mate; John Trelawney, owner; John Hunter and Richard Joyce, owner's servants, landsmen, being all that's left faithful of the ship's company, with stores for 10 days at short rations, came ashore this day and flew British colors on the log house in Treasure Island. Thomas Redruth, owner's servant, landsman, shot by mutineers. James Hawkins, cabin boy, and at the same time I was wondering over poor Jim Hawkins' fate. All hail on the land side. A hail on the land side. "Somebody's hailing us," said Hunter, who was on guard. "Doctor, Squire, Captain, hello, Hunter, is that you?" came the cries, and I ran to the door in time to see Hawkins, safe and sound, climbing over the stockade. That is chapter 18. Let's see what 19 looks like. I think we can do 19 as well. Chapter 19. Narrative resumed by Jim Hawkins. The garrison in stockade. The garrison in the stockade. As soon as Ben Gunn saw the colors, he came to a halt, stopped me by the arm, and sat down. "Now," said he, "there's your friend sure enough. Far more likely it's the mutineers, I answered. That, he cried. Why, in a place like this, where nobody puts in but gentlemen of fortune, Silver'd fly the Jolly Roger. You don't make no doubt of that. No, that's your friends. There's been blows, too, and I reckon your friends has had the best of it. And here they are on the shore in the old stockade that was made years and years ago by Flint. Ah, he was a man to have a headpiece. He was, Flint. Ah, he was the man to have a headpiece. He was the man to have a headpiece, was Flint. Barrin' rum, his match were never seen. He were afraid of none, not he. Only Silver. Silver was that genteel. Well, said I, that may be so, and so be it. But all the more reason that I should hurry on and join my friends. Nay, mate, returned Ben, not you. You're a good boy, or I'm mistook. But you're only a boy, all told. Now, Ben Gunn is fly. Rum wouldn't bring me there where you're going. Not rum wouldn't till I see you're born gentleman and gets it on his word of honor. And you won't forget my words. A precious sight, that's what you'll say. A precious sight more confidence. And then nips him. And he pinched me the third time with the same air of cleverness. And when Ben Gunn's wanted, you know where to find him, Jim. Just where you found him today. And him that comes is to have a white thing in his hand, and he's to come alone. Oh, and you'll say this, Ben Gunn, says you, has reasons of his own. Well, said I believe I understand. You have something to propose, and you wish to see the squire or the doctor, and you're to be found where I found you. Is that all? And when? And when, says you, he added. Why, from about noon observation to about 6 bells. Good, said I. Now may I go? You won't forget, he inquired anxiously. Precious sight, and reasons of his own, says you. Reasons of his own, that's the mainstay. As between man and man. Well then, still holding me, I reckon you can go, Jim. And Jim, if you was to see Silver, you wouldn't go for to sell Ben Gunn. Wild horses wouldn't draw it from you. No, says you. And if them pirates camp ashore, Jim, what would you say but there'd be witters in the morning? Here he was interrupted by a loud report, and a cannonball came tearing through the trees and pitched in the sand not 100 yards from where we were talking. The next moment, each of us had taken to his heels in a different direction. For a good hour to come, frequent reports shook the island, and balls kept crashing through the woods. I moved from hiding place to hiding place, always pursued, or so it seemed to me, by these terrifying missiles. But towards the end of the bombardment, though still I durst not venture in the direction of the stockade, where the balls fell oftenest, I had begun, in a manner, to pluck up my heart again, and after a long detour to the east, crept down among the shore-side trees. The sun had just set. The sea breeze was rustling and tumbling in the woods and ruffling the gray surface of the anchorage. The tide, too, was far out, and great tracts of sand lay uncovered. The air, after the heat of the day, chilled me through my jacket. The Hispaniola still lay where she had anchored, but sure enough, there was the Jolly Roger, the black flag of piracy, flying from her peak. Even as I looked, there came another red flash and another report that sent the echoes clattering, and one more round shot whistled through the air. It was the last of the cannonade. I lay for some time watching the bustle which succeeded the attack. Men were demolishing something with axes on the beach near the stockade. The poor jolly boat, I afterwards discovered. Away, near the mouth of the river, a great fire was glowing among the trees, and between that point and the ship, one of the gigs kept coming and going, the men, whom I had seen so gloomy, shouting at the oars like children. But there was a sound in their voices which suggested rum. At length, I thought I might return towards the stockade. I was pretty far down on the low sandy spit that enclosed the anchorage to the east and is joined at half water to Skeleton Island. And now, as I rose to my feet, I saw some further distance down the spit and rising from among low bushes, an isolated rock, pretty high and in color. It occurred to me that this might be the white rock of which Ben Gunn had spoken, and that some day or other a boat might be wanted, and I should know where to look for one. Then I skirted among the woods until I had regained the rear, or shoreward side, of the stockade, and soon was warmly welcomed by the faithful party. I had soon told my story and began to look about me. The The log house was made of unsquared trunks of pine, roof, walls, and floor. The latter stood in several places as much as a foot or a foot and a half above the surface of the sand. There was a porch at the door, and under this porch the little spring welled up into an artificial basin of a rather odd kind, no other than a great ship's kettle of iron, with the bottom knocked out and sunk two or sheerins, as the captain said, among the sand. Little had been left besides the framework of the house, but in one corner there was a stone slab laid down by way of the hearth, and an old rusty iron basket to contain the fire. The slopes of the knoll and all the inside of the stockade had been cleared of timber to build the house, and we could see by the stumps what a fine and lofty grove had been destroyed. Most of the soil had been washed away or buried in drift after the removal of the trees. Only where the streamlet ran down from the kettle, a thick bed of moss and some ferns and little creeping bushes were still green among the sand. Very close around the stockade, too close for defense, they said, the woods still flourished high and dense, all of fir on the land side, but towards the sea with a large admixture of live oaks. The cold evening breeze, of which I have spoken, whistled through every chink of the rude building and sprinkled the floor with a continual rain of fine sand. There was sand in our eyes, sand in our teeth, sand in our suppers, sand dancing in the spring at the bottom of the kettle, for all the world like porridge beginning to boil. Our chimney was a square hole in the roof. It was but a little part of the smoke that found its way out, and the rest eddied about the house and kept us coughing and piping the eye. Add to this that Gray, the new man, had his face tied up in a bandage for a cut he had got in breaking away from the mutineers, and that poor old Tom Redruth, still unburied, lay along the wall, stiff and stark, under the Union Jack. If we had been allowed to sit idle, we should have fallen in the blues. But Captain Smollett was never a man for that. All hands were called up before him, and he divided us into watches. The doctor and Gray and I for one, the squire, Hunter, and Joyce upon the other. Tired though we all were, 2 were sent out for firewood, 2 more were set to dig a grave for Redruth. The doctor was named cook, and I was put sentry at the door. And the captain himself went from one to another, keeping our spirits and lending a hand wherever it was wanted. From time to time, the doctor came to the door for a little air and to rest his eyes, which were almost smoked out of his head, and whenever he did so, he had a word with me. "That man Smollett," he said, "is a better man than I am, and when I say it, it means a deal, Jim." Another time he came and was silent for a while. Then he put his head on one side and looked at me. "Is this Ben Gunn a man?" he asked. "I don't know, sir," said I. "I'm not very sure whether he's sane." "If there's any doubt about the matter, he is," returned the captain. "A man who has been 3 years biting his nails on a desert island, Jim, can't expect to appear as sane as you or me. It doesn't lie in human nature. Was it cheese you said he had a fancy for?" "Yes, sir, cheese," I answered. "Well, Jim," says he, just see the good that comes of being dainty in your food. You've seen my snuff box, haven't you? And you've never saw me take snuff? The reason being that in my snuff box I carry a piece of Parmesan cheese, a cheese made in Italy, very nutritious. Well, that's for Ben Gunn." Before supper was eaten, we buried old Tom in the sand and stood around him for a while bareheaded in the breeze. A good deal of firewood had been got in, but not enough for the captain's fancy, and he shook his head over it and told us we must get back to get back to this tomorrow rather livelier. Then, when we had eaten our pork and each had a good stiff glass of brandy grog, the 3 chiefs got together in a corner to discuss our prospects. It appears they were at their wits' end what to do, the stores being so low that we must be starved into surrender before help came. But our best hope, it was decided, was to kill off the buccaneers until they either hauled down their flag or ran away with the Hispaniola. From 19 they were already reduced to 15. 2 others were wounded, and one at least, the man shot beside the gun, severely wounded, if he were not dead. Every time we had a crack at him, we were to take it, saving our own lives with the extremest care. And besides that, we had 2 able allies, rum and the climate. As for the first, though we were about a half-mile away, we could hear him roaring and singing late into the night. And then as for the second, the doctor staked his wig that, camped where they were in the marsh and unprovided with remedies, the half of them would be on their backs before a week. So, he added, if we're not all shot down first, they'll be glad to be packing in the schooner. It's always a ship, and they can get to buccaneering again, I suppose. First ship I ever lost, said Captain Smollett. I was dead tired, as you may fancy, and when I got to sleep, which was not till after a great deal of tossing, I slept like a log of wood. The rest had been long up, and had already breakfasted and increased the pile of firewood by as much as half again when I was wakened by a bustle and the sound of voices. "Flag of truce," I heard someone say, and then, immediately after, with a cry of surprise, "Silver himself!" And at that, up I jumped, and rubbing my eyes, ran to a loophole in the wall. So that is where we'll stop for tonight. Chapters 17, 18, and 19. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow night.